there. I just wanted to jump in for my daily live. I want to celebrate Bill Wong made a post in the OS Empowered OT's Facebook group, which, by the way, I think I'm going to change the name to the Evolve Living OT OS Collaborative. One of my, I don't know, fatal flaws is I keep changing the names of things. Um, but I hope over time, Evolve Living being a consistent through line in what I create, being a helpful way to identify. But he posted an article from Christopher Alturo looking at some critiques. Christopher Alturo has a long career of critique on developments in OT education exchange, especially around incorporations of the social sciences and social justice frameworks in relation to OT practice and their relevance in the United States. We've definitely had our disagreements over the past decade, and there are many things in his article that I agree with, such as interdisciplinary collaboration and creating space for innovation. However, for me and my lived experience as an OTP in the field over the past decade, it has really been social justice orientations to practice and investment in tangible advocacy skills that I've been co-developing along with Bill Wong. Bill Wong and I are contemporaries of each other in terms of when we entered the OT social media landscape and when we've entered OT leadership. We've really been developing our careers in tandem and had the opportunity to develop some academic work last year, which, will probably be distributed across these platforms over the year as we look at kind of alternative publishing. So I'm definitely for innovation in OT education, and I feel that a lot of my success in the field is because I have a deep background in not just the biomechanical sciences, but also the grounded social sciences and everyday advocacy. Wanting to see OTs grow and increase our, quote unquote, seats at the table, it means that we need to be on diverse tables, lots of different tables across party lines, across grant funding budgets, across different landscapes. This time of the biomechanical model being like the king of the castle is really falling apart at the seams now. And if this is not something you're experiencing personally in your immediate family or on the front lines as a field clinician, it's very evident in the field. It may be glossed over. A lot of these things, you're reading them in papers, in academic publishing, but in everyday practice, we're seeing the regular daily failing of the U.S. health and human service infrastructure, particularly for people with disabilities, which is what just about everyone who's invested heavily in OT theory and OT education eventually kind of circle around the same spot at the end of the day, that we have to be in solidarity with the disability rights and justice movements. That is just factually accurate. When occupational therapy is connected to movements for responding to social injustice that are impacting the lives of people with disabilities, that's where we develop our trust with those communities and ultimately our job security through showing up with tangible action, which sometimes means directing them to a soup kitchen and not just increasing range of motion of an upper extremity or using quantitative measures. Quantitative measures are just one often extremely limited lens that does not allow for a full diagnostic of the context of what's causing occupational disruptions and barriers in one's everyday life. So this notion that, for me, has always trickled back to academic personalities and infighting between academic departments that trickle down to impacting students. And there's often little good faith at the end of the day between these ideologies and belief systems that dictate, what academic department gets big grant funding or not. We have to find ways to identify, notice that, and separate it from how we're engaging with science and how we're engaging with our day-to-day clinical decisions. This may sound like I'm infighting with the biomechanical perspective, and I'll say, I often don't give the biomechanical perspective probably enough credit. It is probably basis that, I got my grounding in it, and it's something that you get really strongly. Ironically, my experience in the field is that often if you are working in clinics that are heavy with PT leadership, they'll sort of like almost force you to adopt a PT perspective, even if that's not your orientation. It's not something as like a girl with ADHD and nonverbal learning disability, I never would have become a physical therapist at all. It's just, I couldn't imagine going through PT school. I would be hitting my head against the wall. I really love chemistry. I love biochemistry. I obviously love evolutionary theory. I love, even looking at the universe through a purely physiological lens. It's engaging to me when it's the whole broad story, like the cosmology and like the geological timelines and the evolution of those things. That can really hold my attention. But from what I understand in the biological frame of reference is with most mammals, a lot of muscle tissue responds consistently across mammal populations. I'm not saying that there isn't more that we don't know, but there's a lot that we do know. Once we can maximize strength, range of motion, endurance, optimizing conditions for a biomechanical like thriving, the barriers that limit performance are often psychosocially bound. They're the motivation, they're the contextual factors, what's going on in the environment. It is what's taking place in the policy landscape. For example, you can have somebody who is navigating the current climate of transphobia that we have and maybe self-isolating in their house and becoming weaker and getting at risk for pelvic floor dysfunction because they're holding their bowel and their bladder an unreliable amount of time for fear of toileting in public. How we address those problems, it increases our innovation or efficacy to have that whole context on the table to respond to. And the innovation for what can come in the next generations of OT is unlikely to exist in our current systems or in the minds of possibilities of even our current occupational therapy leaders. We have to make space for Gen Z, for Gen Alpha, to explore and develop their own theories and epistemologies in relation to occupation. That's what all of us wanted when we entered the field, and it's our job as OT leaders to create that space and not recreate cycles of academic exclusion and trauma and shut down beliefs. That stunts and stifles our growth. We need to get used to supporting OTs that are taking paths less traveled by, even and especially if they're not choices that we would ever make ourselves. In times of collective social collapse, this is creating a critical juncture where opportunities come from the challenges that emerge. And that means not shutting down, not naysaying, not being reactionary to the new developments in our field. Back in 2014, social justice was actually successfully voted to have it removed from AOTA's Code of Ethics. There was such resistance to even having dialogue about social justice within academic spaces, and yet here we are a decade later, and occupational justice and social justice-oriented OT has transformed the whole game. It got so deeply underestimated, and it's needed now more than ever because we have human rights being violated left and right. Having frameworks that allow us to have grounded, tangible skill sets to restore human rights and agency to contextual spaces, that's incredibly valuable. I'm really dreaming and hoping for a future where different paths in OT education don't come from putting other sectors down or trying to limit freedom of speech, epistemology, and growth in these different sectors. I'm hoping we learn from history that repressing and excluding occupational science was such a mistake in the occupational therapy context. We could have been evolving so much further and so much faster, especially in these policy landscapes that speak social science languages and don't speak biomechanical languages. That's not the only stakeholder to engage with. And right now, AOTA, one of our champion legislation is to be able to opt out of Medicare. We're kind of done with being hampered by these systems that don't even let us provide even subpar occupational therapy services if they let us even qualify people at all. It's wild. These traditional systems, they're just not working right now, and I really love that I got to access education that allows me to talk about it, and have a tool and discipline that enables constructive adaptation in spite of these challenges. To me, that's what OT is, and I'll always be a champion for integrative learning. I believe that having a balanced diet of the humanities, social sciences, physical and biomechanical sciences is just really healthy for any professional to have. And certainly, yes, I agree that the academic structure just it really is poor for clinical education in general, but that doesn't mean limiting and excluding certain perspectives. It means making more space for them and encouraging students to become lifelong engagers in everyday learning and having open and growth mindsets towards diverse perspectives. And really looking at people to role model that with maturity, equity, and respectability between faculty. So I certainly encourage folks to be discerning with how they want to continue their OT education. And I believe that we should continue to make a lot of this material more accessible to the field clinicians so that through academic structures isn't the only line that we're getting updated in our best practices. So I hope to help facilitate that here. But I do want to encourage and celebrate the contributions that Bill Wong has made to our profession by playing an active role in the innovation that takes place at TEDx conferences and championing our voice and visibility with innovators of the next generation, not only with STEM, but also responding to justice concerns of our times in the landscape of climate crisis. All of these things have often get brought up in OT dialogue as if social justice concerns are somehow intangible or abstract or academic, but climate crisis is impacting us yearly. This has been, it feels like summer in late October in Washington State. We have national disasters. We have gun and police violence that is pervasive. We have people that are getting kicked off of what they're going to need to be able to feed themselves. These are exactly the conditions from which occupational therapy was born in the first place, and our founders showed up in the field. They showed up very practically to help people get what they needed to go, even building businesses out of their own folk arts and crafts initiatives. That is tangible, that is material, that is physical. My facilitation of the Being, Becoming, Belonging quilt last year that we got to display it at the Olympia Arts Walk has now been on display in the Olympia City Hall, which is our state capitol. And so every state capitol that go, they stop and visit the Crazy Quilt and read about intersectional disability justice, occupational science, occupational therapy, and the role that we've made from bringing communities together in times of scarcity, because that's what quilts do for hopes for the future generations. I got to show this quilt, display this quilt to our lieutenant governor in Olympia for Evergreen State College's Lobby Day. I got to bring autistic self-advocate, another fellow Evergreen grad, with myself to really center disability accessibility for higher education in our state dialogue in the context of budget crisis. So what got me a seat at those tables, which then escalated to more recently getting back from the Access to Justice conference with members of the Supreme Court, I got to meet the first Supreme Court justice appointed that is a woman, is part indigenous, part Jewish, queer, gender diverse, has autism, has a connective tissue disorder, identifies as disabled, and is currently presiding over justice issues and intersectional. This quilt in of itself has helped me bring visibility to our role with juvenile justice and correction and helping with holistic well-being outcomes. So I really object this notion that it's a fallacy that social justice oriented and humanities-based oriented academics limits our seat at the table. How could that be anything but expansive, especially as we emerging in the ongoing human rights crisis of our times? Respectfully, I also disagree. And Bill Wong, I am championing your work in TEDx and our visibility for OT. It has been an honor to be a trailblazer with you in innovation. And even though we don't always receive support and encouragement from our OT leaders and elders, we can show up and support each other and create inclusivity, belonging, and celebration for diverse modes of practice outside these systems. And that's really a big part of what I'm hoping to create and facilitate with this group, which will soon be renamed the Evolved Living OTOS Collaborative. That's also welcome to other allied fields and community collaborators, especially those that are engaging in the therapeutic and community arts, which there's really innovative research out there that is showing that community arts actually have more efficient utilization and responsiveness to mental health community needs in crisis than almost anything else that's been governmentally created. Almost like those initial occupational therapists were onto something before it was celebrated and studied in the formal academy, and here we are still trying to resist studying and celebrating it today. But for sure, not on my watch. I'm going to be upholding this lineage of OT practice that is so transformative and deeply linked to a belief that human rights are something that should be facilitated inclusively for all, and that is in alignment with Vision 2030 for the AOTA's vision that we're all collectively working on together, hopefully with more unity and support for each other than tearing each other down.